welcome to the Zoomtown experiment. For today's video, we're going to look at what I'm calling a mysterious problem. I honestly don't understand it, but I see what's happening. So you may want to follow along pretty closely on this one, and if you got ideas and suggestions, please drop me a comment below. Before we get started onto that, there's two things with MicroPython and the Raspberry Pi PICO that always bothered me: threading and interrupts. With threading, it's been part of MicroPython and PICO since the beginning, and it's always been in the documentation noted that it's experimental. In all fairness, it has worked for me quite consistently and quite well. However, there's many people who have experienced problems with it, and I assume that's why it's still in that experimental stage. I guess that part bothers me, but yet I think what bothers me more is it's still experimental after this many years. This isn't a very new product anymore. It's starting to reach maturity. But that isn't what we'll be focusing on today. The other thing that bothers me is interrupts, and they've always been iffy to me. The documentation is clear that you are not guaranteed an interrupt will occur. They document numerous conditions that can cause problems, and I just discovered one that makes no sense to me whatsoever. Since the beginning of the Zoomtown experiment, consistent positioning has been a big problem. Positioning can work 3 times in a row perfectly, and then on the 4th time it's off by several inches. How can that be? I have resolved many contributing problems over the past year that were mechanical related or maybe in my programming code, etc., things that I've changed and we've seen before and after things got better. But the other day I was truly blindsided by what I saw, and it really caused me to step back and pause, scratch my head, and I got to take a deeper dive into it. And that's kind of what I'm sharing with you. I'm sharing with you in this video what I observed, what I think is going on, but yet it doesn't make sense. Please follow along. As I have mentioned in previous videos, I use interrupts to detect encoder pulses for each wheel via the encoder. I also wrote a PIO routine and tested that, which proved that interrupts work perfect because the PIO routine was showing me the exact same number of counts as what the interrupt routine is. So PIO and interrupt, two very different processes and methods to count encoder pulses, and they're in agreement with each other, test after test after test, within one encoder count. So I went back to just going with the interrupts. PIO is great. It's very fast, very efficient, but it's horribly slow if I'm fetching from it constantly, fetching data from the FIFO buffer into a variable that I can use in the MicroPython side. I know there's ways around that, but to me that's a workaround, and I'd rather not play in that sandbox, at least for right now. I simply don't understand PIO well enough to play in that sandbox. In order for me to explain this, I think it's important you observe it with me. Okay, I've got over here in Zoomtown, I got a mark on the road over here that is 40 inches away from the left edge of that yellow piece of tape. That is what the test is. I'm going to start at 0 and we're going to go to 40 inches. And that would be the photosensors underneath the zooming, not necessarily the front end. So if things seem off by a little bit, don't get caught up on that. These problems will be much greater than 6 or 7 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. But anyhow, I'm telling the Zoomy to go from this point all the way to here, 40 inches, only using encoder counts. But it will do line following, so the numbers won't be absolutely perfect, because when it's steering, it's making additional counts or fewer counts. So that part, just get in your head. I'll go ahead, I'll run the program, and this is just running flat out with a clean program, no print statements, no nothing. And we'll see where the Zoomy stops. You can see it steering a little bit there. Went past the 40-inch mark. Interesting. It should have stopped at that black tape. So I'm going to put a marker there. Okay, I put this, you can't really see it at the moment, but there's a blue device sitting right in front of the Zoomy, touching the front of it. I'm going to move the Zoomy back to the start point. What we're going to do now is do what I do very frequently. It's a very bad habit, yes I know, but I've been doing it, programming for, what, 40-some years now, and I have yet to break from it. Let's say I wanted to monitor the movement along this way, you know, across or during the 40 inches of travel. By the way, 40 inches is about a meter for those of you on the other side of the planet. So I'm going to uncomment this print X position statement. It's traveling along the X-axis. We'll clear this out. I'm going to hit stop just because I want everything clear, and we'll rerun the test. And a little bit of steering in the movement. That could be pretty close to where we should be. So what I'll do is I'll put another marker at that point, and we'll run another test. Back into our program again. I'm going to turn off that print statement. And I'm going to put in a sleep. I don't always do these sleeps. Very rarely do I actually do it. But I went in to do that test as an analog, so to speak, of what I think was happening. We know that MicroPython and printing and through the Thani environment, etc., is a very inefficient, slow process. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we're creating a delay by printing, and that's somehow messing up the counter. So I thought, well, to verify that, let's introduce or get rid of the print statement, which I don't know how long that delay is, and I'll put in a sleep statement, and we'll see how that affects this. And I took that test a little further than I'm going to show you, but we'll go over those results in a minute. We'll go ahead, we'll run the program. And look where it stopped this time. Now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, that kind of makes sense. We're creating artificial delays in a program, and that could be goofing up the count. However, interrupts, by their nature, need to interrupt the process that's running and take care of that activity, then get back and start continuing with that other process. But here's where it gets really weird. Just so you're aware of what you're seeing here on the screen, I got a note here. This is 40 inches. Oops, that's supposed to be inches, not feet. It stopped at 40.101. There's a little run on there because it's not decelerating. But the counts from the encoder, this is what's important. 11,676, 11,559. So we'll just simply use a simple number right now, 11,500 for both wheels. It drove 40 inches in what it measured reading encoder counts. And that's verified by the actual encoder counts. You see the mystery there, right? It is counting. It, being the program, the interrupts had to have triggered 11,500 times to get to that point. But how could it? That's the mystery of this. Let's take a look at what I'm doing here in the program. Okay, now as you just saw, this little routine is I'm performing the cruising function. Another routine, interrupt routines, and I'll get to those in a minute. Actually, when it sees a pulse from the encoder, it will go through and increment a counter by 1. Real complicated, right? And this is the decision maker right here as to when to stop. And distance to go is how much further it's got to go, and that's calculated from where it is and where it was and all that. And once it gets to that, or it drops below 0, reach the end of that 40-inch trip, the motor stops. I clear out the current action for the interpreter of the trip plan, and then I print this statement, which is what we're reading. That's it. You can see how much difference between here and here. And in a minute, I'll give you some actual values so that you see what I'm talking about in scale. Now again, backing up, I use print a lot in my programs to monitor stuff. Whenever I'm doing motion control, I need to see the data, and then you've seen me use that data in spreadsheets to graph out the information so that you get a much better understanding of what's going on. So historically, I've been doing that all throughout this whole process, but never understanding that it's messing up how the interrupts work. Okay, so now let's just get some data as far as sizes so that you know how much proportionally difference we've got here. So this one overshot by about 3 inches, and that was with no printing and no dwelling, anything like that. This one overshot by 1 inch and a little more than 1 inch. And that one stopped short by 10.5 inches. This is insanely bad. Trying to reason all this out has not been good, but I did do a little deeper digging, and bear with me on this. I'm going to call up a spreadsheet, and over here are the tests that I ran. The first one I call ideal. If everything went to 40 inches and stopped, we would be perfect. And that's what this bar graph here is showing on column A. That's 40. So everything should have stopped at that point and also physically stopped there, as well as the encoder counts should be there. And that when I take away the print statement that was in that function, which gets run lots of times per movement, I went too far. That's what I just showed you in the measurement there. And it was only a couple of inches. Then, when I get rid of that, turn off the printing like I just did in our example, and then I thought, well, let's try sleeping. And in the example I showed you, we did printing and then a sleep for 20 milliseconds. Well, here I did 1 millisecond, 5 millisecond, 20 milliseconds. And this is what we see. It stopped short at 37, 32, and 29.7. So we get all the way down to, let's see, 29.7 is column F. Pretty bad, right? And it's very well tied to the sleep and, of course, printing. Those are the only changes being made, but my counter is speeding up. If it were slowing down, like for example, think this through. If the print statement was somehow blocking the interrupt, we would be missing counts. So it would have to go further. And that's what you would think, okay, that's what was happening here. That was an easy assumption. It's not true, but that's an easy assumption. But on all these sleep, if we were missing 1 millisecond or 5 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds of counting from the encoder via the interrupt, the ZooMe physically would have to go much further to make up for all those missing counts. What is happening is that somehow the interrupt is at times double counting. I have no idea why. It's a very simple routine. I either look for a rising signal or a falling signal, and at that point it'll run the handler, which simply adds 1 to a counter, period. There isn't electrical noise on these things, and electrical noise wouldn't magically start happening if we were running a print statement or sleeping. So you can kind of just throw that belief out right away. Plus, I've run many, many tests with the oscilloscope back before it broke, and the data is always clean as can be, very well. It almost looks like it's going through a Schmidt trigger or something. But I ran this test twice and got predictable results, right? Up, down, up, down. And from that, I just had to go back and look at the code. So now let's look at what the code is doing. We're going to go back into the program. This is the area that we're addressing the start and stop and displaying the count and making the decision to stop. Give me a minute. And here we are with the interrupt handler code. Here's where I start up the code, left encoder, right encoder. I'm only using a single channel. It is quadrature, but I'm only looking at one of the 2 channels. We're using pin 15, pull-up resistor on it. I've also tested this, pull up, pull down, no resistor. And it's been, as I said, on a scope, it looks beautiful and everything is working as proper there. The trigger is pin rising or pin falling. That's the pipe signal here means or. And then it'll run the handler, LA. And the handler, LA, as required or recommended by MicroPython documentation, keep it as brief and simple as possible. I have a global variable I have to declare, and I increment it by 1. That's it. It can't be any shorter. So that was very interesting. That's as far as I've gotten so far, and I'm going to go through, do a lot more digging on this, but what I got to take away from that is interrupts cannot be trusted. And I may have to go to the PIO routine and incorporate DMA memory access so that I can get the data efficiently, or I explore a little deeper into the interrupts. Now, the most mysterious part about this, and if you got any ideas, please feel free to try to explain it to me, and hopefully I can try to do a test to validate one way or the other. But from my perspective, when I'm printing or sleeping, I'm getting more counts than I should. And therein is the problem. It makes no sense why that should happen. So if you got any ideas, please let me know. In the meantime, I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to break from my bad habit of always printing data and just ignore that feedback, or if I do it, just in a controlled, okay, we're going to do it, stop it, and then get rid of that. And I'll go through, calibrate this, and then I got to go through and repeat all the tests I've done so far, because this greatly affects everything I've done up to this point. It's a mystery, folks. Hopefully you followed along on that. It is very convoluted, but hopefully you can see it very clearly. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. You don't hear me, I'm in love.
one.